Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sensitive Podcast. Today, I am joined by Kate Swaboda, very special guest that I'm very excited to introduce. But before I go into that introduction, I just want to share for a moment. This is only the second episode with kind of a new podcast focus. So I have shifted to focusing on thresholds that we go through in life, really shifting from what got me here isn't going to get me where I'm going next. These can be thresholds of matrescence or midlife or career change or business pivot. I believe that we all go through many, many, many of these thresholds in our life and many, many of these thresholds in our business. And I'm talking to folks who I have seen and witnessed go through these thresholds in their life with courage, with grace. And I say courage very strategically because Kate's work is very much centered around courage and action. Kate is a phenomenal coach, a dear mentor of mine. Kate is who taught me to coach. If you're ever wondering who taught me to coach, this is the person. She is the founder of Credentialed Life Coach Collective, where I received my coaching certification. She's also the host of the Craft of Coaching podcast. And in this conversation, Kate is going to share a little bit about a season where a series of what seemed like reasonable choices on paper around work, around family, around place where they lived, really slowly pulled her out of alignment with her values, eventually leading to a kind of collapse. And this is not a highlight reel story or here's how I turned it all around episode. It's a conversation about what happens when you realize that the life you built is no longer aligned with who you are, and continuing to push would require abandoning yourself. So we will let the story unfold in Kate's own words, and I will turn it over to Kate to introduce herself a little bit more deeply before we dive in.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm the director of training for the CLCC coach training program at teamclcc.com. And I've been a life coach since 2006. I have the yourcourageouslife.com website and also the Your Courageous Life podcast. So apparently I like podcasting. And I am also the author of 2 books, The Courage Habit and 100% Fully Alive. So thinking about the human experience would definitely be my jam.
Yeah. I'm so excited to dive into this. Yeah, let's just dive right in. So before what you now think of as the crash, that period where things really stopped working for you, what were those small, reasonable compromises you were making that seemed harmless, but in hindsight, you actually recognized that it was pulling you away from your values, Kate?
Yeah. And the important part of that question, I think, is really in hindsight, because it's always been very important to me to be authentic in terms of my process. My entire platform is about how no one is really fearless. That doesn't exist, but you can definitely fear, less. Like you can have less of it. It can control your life less, but everyone experiences insecurity, self-doubt, anxiety, fear, whatever name you want to put on it. Everyone experiences it, and it's going to come up whenever we're going through a period of growth, or when we're out of capacity, or when we're stretching into something new. And so at the time, I don't think I really realized what was happening. But, the genesis of this crash really was that I had been running a business for several years. I had always been, I'm an eldest daughter, whatever, credo you want to give to this, or power you want to give to this, Sagittarius with 5 placements in Virgo, which somebody doing my chart once told me were the get shit done powerhouses of the zodiac. It's the way she put it. I loved it. And, just always have been really wired towards, well, like, instead of complaining about a problem, let's get in there and do something about it. Let's, oh, this is interesting. And I think wired towards entrepreneurship. And I had been working for many, many years, had built a successful business, successful by multiple measures, book deals, speaking gigs, followers, multiple six figures, all of that. It was all going. And I think I was also starting to get kind of burned out. But I don't think that's what I would have called it at the time. And so I think a lot of what I was doing at the time was just like thinking that, oh, this is just what it takes. And I think I believed the lie of I'll slow down when things slow down, that fantastical period when everything is somehow going to get calmer without me having to make a choice or prioritize. And, you don't know what you don't know until you realize what you don't know. And I did not realize just how much I was putting on my own plate. But I also think, too, that there were things that I was doing that were causing me to carry more. And when I look back, I think the thing that I the thing that I would target the most, one would be how different people in my life and in my family were treating me. Um, I would say often felt very disengaged and dismissive, and sometimes was outright rude or cruel. And yet this pattern showed up in a lot of places in my life. It showed up in friendships. It didn't just show up with my family. It showed up in people I hired to work within my business. And I think the story that caught me a lot of the time was, well, gosh, I mean, I'm not perfect, oh, they were like getting really irritated and stressed. Like but I do that too. And I think that then I would sort of absorb what was happening or what was coming my way without ever fully metabolizing it. Um, and then it just all started to really pile up. I think there were places where I wasn't really getting ruthless about telling the truth about what I wanted, what I needed. And I thought I was telling the truth at the time because my truth at the time, again, in hindsight, was let me continue to try to make this work. Let me have empathy. Let me, continue to try to support XYZ. It'll get better. And I think that optimism and a belief that things will get better, and this has been shown in psychological studies too, can really be helpful. It can help people to be on an upward spiral where they feel more resilient and capable. But I think I took that to such a degree that I wasn't always discerning. But wait a second, am I doing what is supposed to be right and then sacrificing on some level, to your question, pulling away from my values? And I think that in hindsight, I see those places where that was happening. And what it led to was clinical burnout. People talk about, oh my God, I'm so burned out, like kind of as a little colloquial conversational piece. I was clinically burned out. I was really struggling to do much of anything. I could sit and stare out a window and that was it. Um, and very, very depressed, really just feeling a deep sadness. And I think I made misaligned choices from that place, and misaligned choices, compound. And then I started to isolate. So it became very much like this thing that, like a flywheel that builds momentum, bad choices building more momentum, putting more bad choices on top of that, misaligned choices, isolating as yet another misaligned choice, and on and on. And it was at one point, I would say, very serious depression where I was really questioning, am I a good person, a worthy person? Do I want to be alive? And I think the one thing that kept me from really taking it farther was that I've read, the research and the studies on like the impact of suicide on the people who are left behind, and particularly your kid. And I have a kid. So that was not a question. I was not going to do that. I was very clear I would not do that because then that would harm my kid. But at the same time, I didn't particularly want to be alive. And then I felt really stuck. Like I have somehow twisted my life into a knot that I don't know how to untangle. So a lot of compromises around not telling my full truth, not slowing down to ask myself what my truth was, not pausing to um, define boundaries around how I wanted to be treated, or hold a line around how I wanted to be treated, and then a lot of misaligned choices that were about like, can I just get some relief? And that gets really tricky.
Hmm. First of all, thank you so much for sharing so candidly.
Yeah.
I feel like I got emotional hearing you share it because I've been in those places myself. And I think that it's not talked about enough. And when you are in the thick of that, it can feel like you're completely alone, and like I'm the only person that's ever felt this awful on the face of the planet, which, logically, isn't true, but in those moments it feels true because you're so isolated.
Yeah.
And so I really hope that even if anybody hears this and is like, yeah, man, I've felt like that too, that this can be relieving for even one person. I had those same sentiments. I had such severe postpartum depression and anxiety, and it was the same. I was never actively had suicidal ideation, but I just would like hope and pray that I wouldn't wake up. I was like, can I just not be here? I just wanted to disappear. It's like, can I just disappear and just have all of this go away? Because I can't see a way out. And, I think there was a couple things that stood out for me of how you ended up in this place. It First of all, just that it was so earnest, of like I was giving grace, I was giving compassion to other people. I was having an optimistic mindset, right? I was being, I thought, honest with myself, but I wasn't actually slowing down enough to get as honest with myself as I needed to be, right? Um, and from the outside and even with ourselves, it can be like, well, I checked all of these boxes. I was doing all of the things, and how did I still end up here? And some of the questions that came up for me and what you shared was, now in hindsight, maybe again this can be helpful for someone listening. What is the difference for you now going forward, having had this experience, between this optimism of things are going to turn around, things are going to get better, and um the discernment that you were talking about of, actually, I'm reaching my limit and I can't continue to extend grace with people, even if they're just having a bad day or whatever. I can't continue to allow myself to be treated this way.
Mhm. When I look at my experience, I think I think there are like, this is just my kind of broader spiritual perspective. I think that the, you know, I I have to choose my words very carefully, as my awareness that the internet is the internet struggles with critical thinking and nuance. So I want to be very clear that I never think people deserve suffering. I never think it's okay that people suffer. And I take the perspective personally that everything in my life is something that I can potentially learn from. And so I look at this period in my life as almost like, on some broader plane that I can't control, things had to crash because there was no way it was going to crash otherwise, if that makes sense. So I essentially needed to go through that experience to learn what I would then learn. Um, I'm really big on, how can I be proactive rather than reactive? How can I assess my life so that I'm noticing when something isn't working and I'm being proactively responsive to what's coming up rather than reactive. And that's a great skill. And I think so many different things compounded that I could not even apply that skill, if that makes sense. Like, even that had to stop working in my life, air quotes, because there was just no way I was going to see what I needed to see or understand what I needed to understand. So, um, I'm not talking about like law of attraction. You attract your suffering. Again, I'm never saying that it's okay that people suffer. I have deep empathy for the fact that people suffer. I would never, in the middle of someone suffering, say, well, how might you be orchestrating this or, causing it for yourself or something like that. But when there's been enough time and space, I think it's a valuable question to ask, what was going on there? What can I learn from that experience? Because I can't change the past anyway. So the value becomes, what can I learn from it? And I think that there was just this, it had to get that bad. Like it had to get that bad. I was crying in the shower. I was not wanting to wake up, all the different things. And then the isolating, I think, came from a place of shame over all that I felt I had lost. Um, and I had made the choices to let go of the things that I had quote unquote lost. But then I think they were misaligned choices. So some of those choices, because not everyone knows the story, one of them was to leave California. I love living in Sonoma County. And yet I think I just got to a point where I was burned out, but I couldn't look at my own burnout at the time. That was unconscious to me. Instead, it was I looked to the external. California can be a very expensive place to live. So maybe if we moved somewhere else and I still ran my business and still, I didn't want to have to change me, right? Then I would have more money at the end of the day and things wouldn't be so tight and da 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 da. Um, and so it's like that was one choice that I see as misaligned. It was a choice made for money, not necessarily for what I truly wanted. So we left California. We eventually ended up in Colorado. I knew before I went to Colorado that I hate snow, I hate cold, I hate winter. I grew up in Missouri. I know what winter feels like. I love the fact that California is so warm. Um, and it just was like, then that became a thing where it was like, it was cold, it was dark, it was a lot. All this happened during the pandemic. I lost a lot of community when I left California. And it's not that people like weren't still texting me or something, but like you can't really make up for your best friend being, a quick drive away. You can just go out to dinner anytime, which is what I had in California. Plus, with the pandemic, it was really hard to establish community. With the pandemic, it was my husband and I both working from home for a period there while my daughter was at home with us, and she was a very young child. That's a lot for my nervous system. I am an introvert. I needed that time where kiddo was at school and I could like work alone. Um, and then also, I then make the choice, what, finally it's like, oh, it's the business. It's the business. I need to take a step back from my business. And so I take this step back from my business. And at the time, again, it seemed like the choice I would have wanted. I'm like, I'm just going to get a W-2 salary job, close the laptop at the end of the day, never have to worry about making all these decisions, da 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 da. Well, I mean, it didn't take long before I was in those environments and all the things that I had experienced previously in corporate environments and that my clients would often come to me for coaching around in corporate environments was happening. Disrespect, abusive treatment, being discarded, people minimizing your contribution, politics, back channeling, like all of these things that like people hate about corporate. And then it was like, here I am. I moved my family away. Now my husband is settled. My daughter is settled. My daughter in particular, she's making friends and friends are incredibly important to kids. And I let go of this business. So I'm not doing work I love anymore. To pay the bills, I'm now working in an arena that I'm not happy working in. And I'm completely stuck. I mean, it was just this perfect backdrop of being isolated and not liking the outcomes of your choices. And it just really led to, a fall, a fall. So anyway, I think I might have lost the thread of your question in sharing some of that backstory. So if you want to pull me back a little bit or grab something from there, please do.
Yeah. I don't remember my question at this point, but what I'm just struck with the earnestness of it, of like I get the sense of this, I'm going to pull on levers, I'm going to make these changes and see what moves the needle to help me feel better. And
Yep.
when we're in this place of feeling so bad, it makes perfect sense of like, okay, this lever didn't work. Let me try another one. And this lever didn't work, and let me try another one. And then there's this snowball, and I'm choosing that word strategically because of the snow in California, right? The snowball of, like you said, what ended up being misaligned choices. And suddenly you're waking up in a life and you're like,
Where did
it's
I
like,
go?
yeah, where did I go? I'm not in Sonoma County. I don't have my best friends. I don't have my community. I don't have the work that I love. I'm in corporate and getting this treatment that I don't like. I am in a place where I'm having to deal with snow and winter and in the middle of a pandemic. And it's like, what, how did this happen? Right?
Yeah. I mean, the question, where did I go, was a question that was on my mind a lot. Um, and I think that it was like, you notice I pulled every lever except the levers that were hardest to pull. And again, I only see in hindsight that those were that the levers I needed to pull were to, I think there were two in particular, to get really ruthlessly honest about what I need. And also, um, oh, I just lost my train of thought. You're gonna have to edit this later or something. But um, give me just 1 second. Sorry.
Yeah. Take your time.
Oh, not needing control.
Yeah.
I love that I lost my thought at that moment. So the two levers were really getting ruthlessly honest and being okay with uncertainty, not needing control. Because I think that was the thing that, I loved the work of my business. That was never a question. What made it hard was my tendencies to overwork combined with uncertainty. And it's like, what happened during the pandemic years to everybody running a business? It's like, it's already, there's uncertainty running a business. And then the pandemic years hit, and it's like the uncertainty just went times 100. Can I keep the doors open 1 year to the next? And, at that point, I have people on my payroll, aside from me. So I think that this combination of those factors was just really, really tough. But those were the levers that only when I started to go through some of this stuff, and particularly when I started to get help, did it really occur to me that I needed to get more honest and that I had to start being more tolerating of just not knowing, but trusting that it would work out.
What comes up for me here, Kate, and I would love to hear your take on this, is maybe the inevitability of the crash and that it wasn't avoidable. I know I heard you say earlier that you love to take a proactive approach instead of a reactive approach, and 1,000% agree. And I think, like, if people can't tell by this conversation, I want to say, like, Kate is an incredibly self-aware person. She spent years and years and years and years doing all sorts of work here, right? You've been a coach for many, many years. Um, like, this wasn't from a lack of self-awareness, right? And,
Yeah, every choice I thought I was making with a really great rationale.
right. And so I guess what I'm trying to point to is I think that sometimes we think and feel that when we reach a certain level of self-awareness, or when we reach a place of honesty with ourselves, that we can prevent such things from happening to us. Really, kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, that we can prevent our suffering. And
And
again,
to a
it's
certain
not,
degree, you can.
you can
Like
to a
that's
certain
that's the
degree, right?
paradox. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because it was working really well for me until it wasn't. Like to a certain degree, absolutely. The choices that I had made a lot of really great choices. And it was just, I think this like I said, that I inevitable. I agree with you. I think that on some level, for my spiritual path in my life, it was inevitable. And I can't help but wonder how many other really high functioning, wonderful, particularly I think women, high performers, eldest daughters, moms, people juggling five things will listen to this. And um, my hope would be that they would be a little comforted that if life suddenly seems like it goes sideways, that they would maybe be less self-blaming than I was. a little more compassionate, because sometimes life just kicks you in the teeth. That is what I say about those years of my life. It was like 2020 through early 2023, somewhere around there. Sometimes life just kicks you in the teeth.
Yeah.
And there were definitely things that I was doing throughout that time that I think made it better. I've been meditating consistently since 2018. I think that was a good choice to make that kept me from falling deeper. Exercise, good choice to make, kept me from falling deeper. But when I say that I tried things, I mean I tried things. I went to workshops in Colorado. I don't mean personal growth. I meant I tried to establish community by going to workshops and classes in Colorado. I bought the biggest, heaviest coat. I think it was Shackleton who said, like, there's no bad weather. There's just like not dressing for the weather. And I like bought the best boots and the warmest everything. And I was like, you know what, we're gonna go have fun. And I really gave it, the good old try. And it was not my place. It was not my place. Colorado was consistently irritating to me, frankly. It was like wearing an itchy sweater, and the sweater can fit, but like there's always this like little itch. And it wasn't just the cold and the darkness. There are miller moths that come through every June. It's super hot in the summer. The mosquitoes are insane. Uh, and then I would feel like I waited all winter for warm weather, and then I can't even enjoy it. Like we go out hiking and like get hit by mosquitoes. They'd be in our backyard. Like it just was not the place for me. And people love it there. Love it there. There are people who think I'm crazy to not love it there, but it was not the place for me.
Yeah, and I'm particularly interested at this point in my life in paradoxes, of because I find so much of truth lives there, right? And in a paradox of my choices absolutely making aligned choices with my values can absolutely make my life better. And it may not have been able to prevent the crash.
Mhm.
Both, right?
Yep.
Um, and that those things don't have to be contradictory to each other, that they are both true. And I hope that the folks that are listening, like you're saying, I listen and I very much resonate with your story. Not an eldest daughter, but may as well have been, based on just different things, dynamics in my family. Really high overachiever. Also someone with like a get her done attitude. I can out effort anyone. Like I'm a bull in a china shop. I put my mind to something. I'm going to do it. I am tenacious. I am perseverant. I will just, I'll do it. And it reminds me a lot of when I had my cancer scare this past year of I ended up in a ambulance being carried away from my house to the hospital. I have never experienced that much pain in my life, including unmedicated. Like 17 hours of unmedicated labor couldn't touch this. Um, it was really scary. And I had all of these tests and was in and out of hospitals and doctors, and finally got an image on my hip, and they were like really doomsday type of information coming through of like there's this mass in your bone in your hip, and it has all the characteristics of really aggressive fast growing cancer, is what they were saying. And um you know it it upended my life. Completely upended my life. And there were certain things that, and thank goodness I have since found out, if people who are listening don't know this story, I've since found out that it was benign. I still have to get my scans at 6 months and a year and make sure that it's not growing. And if it is growing, they've told me you will be in a hip replacement immediately. We've got to get it out. So, I'm not completely in the clear yet, but for most intents and purposes, I think mostly I am. But I look at that and kind of similar to you, it's like I am somebody that is so self-aware, has made so many proactive choices of alignment in my life, and couldn't have planned for this. And there were so many things that came through the fallout of this that I recognize, again, only in hindsight, I wasn't being completely honest with myself. I wasn't being ruthlessly honest with myself of there are things that were intolerable that I needed to really self-advocate about and that needed to end. There were patterns that needed to end, uh, that that had to happen, and there had to be this crash for me as well. So just wanted to share that in case there's, just covering multitudes of stories of high achieving, over functioning women who can handle all the things and who end up in a crash, and hopefully listening to this, folks can have less shame, less self-judgment, and more so recognizing sometimes things need to crash
Yeah.
in order to get better.
Sometimes it's just part of a growth process. And I know we've all heard that before. And I think that for those who walk with a perfectionist pattern, such as myself, there's a desire to make it like neat and pretty, like to make it and that's a human desire. Like, who wants to struggle more than they need to struggle? Okay. But I think there was a way that I thought that I could strategically maneuver those situations, um and I just couldn't. And I think that once I started to really struggle, that also threw me for a loop of this question, where did I go, is, very adjacent to, well, who am I anyway? Who have I been? Who is this who's showing up here, who like isn't optimistic and isn't hopeful and is really down in it and feels really irritated chronically and sad and anxious and like, all the things, like, who is this person? And also some semblance of, was everything that I had built before this a lie? Was it was I like deluding myself this entire time? Now, the good news for anyone listening to this who maybe is on the precipice of this moment or the middle of this moment, I do want to say is that I am so grateful to have walked through what I've walked through. I do feel like I have found that place where first of all, I do think that my ambition is real. And I have found a place where I've embraced a lot healthier ambition, which frankly just has to do with a lot of surrendering to the unknown, releasing attachment to outcome. I will have my ambition and I'll hustle and I'll work for my business because I love my business and I love my work. But I'm no longer so attached to the outcome of got to hit this amount of money, gotta do this amount of stuff. Like, it's like I'm no longer working through lunch or working through dinner, doing the thing where I say just 15 more minutes, which like we all know becomes an hour. So those are the things that I've stopped doing and have shifted. And there's a lot of other places in my life where in my downtime, there's just more balance. So I'm really grateful in hindsight, again, for having gone through what I went through. And of course, then there's more boundaries and there are people who are no longer in my life. And I think that making some of those harder decisions brought a lot of peace. But sometimes being brought to the brink is the only way we're going to make those decisions. And that's the paradox.
Yeah. I want to talk about you telling the unvarnished truth. The point where you got to where you said, I'm deeply unhappy. I made a mistake, right? Like, I thought it was a great idea to move my family to Colorado. Turns out not such a great idea. And I want to know, like, what do you feel like being that honest, being radically honest with yourself, with your family, with those in your life made possible that endurance and pushing through never could?
It's a great question. Well, first, I'll just say that I had been isolating quite a bit, and I had isolated to the point where I was not even receiving coaching from my longtime coach, Matthew. Um, and he knew something was up because I wasn't returning his calls. Matthew and I have a relationship that is, kind of goes beyond not kind of, it completely goes beyond like a coach-client relationship. I'd say we're friends in addition to a coach-client relationship. So there's a dual relationship there. And we acknowledge it and we talk about it, and, very open, transparent conversation about that. And he so we would be in the habit of just occasionally talking, and I went a really long time without reaching out to him, and then he would reach out to me, and I wasn't calling him back. And I wasn't calling him back because he would know that things were really, really wrong. So when I finally did call him back and said, okay, I need some coaching, and we started to have sessions, he was the first person who really heard me saying, like, the truth is, your truth that I'm hearing is that you're deeply unhappy and that you want you don't want to continue to live in Colorado. I was so like, that felt like the nuclear option to leave Colorado, and go back to California to me. And again, all of my stuff happening was not just because of Colorado. I'm worried there's going to be some like Colorado enthusiasts who listen to this who are like, this is crazy. Colorado's awesome. And she's just a hater. It's like, it's not about Colorado. It's about if a place just isn't for you. It could have been anywhere. All right. And plenty of people, I'm sure, have been to California and been like, California's not the place for me. So the first thing was the power of coaching and someone reflecting back to me, here's what I'm hearing, and me arguing with him with why I couldn't ever make that choice. And so for a while, it was me arguing against myself. And then it became, okay, I understand this is what I want, but my husband loves it here. My husband's a backpacker. I am not a backpacker, Kim. Like, I do not drop a deuce in the woods. That's not who Kate is. My husband's like, I will go out for 7 days and eat crappy dehydrated food and sleep on a hard ground in a cold tent, and wake up in the morning and, like, then have to go walk for 12 hours to my next spot, dropping a deuce in the woods the whole time. And he's like, he's gonna do this for 7 days. No, I'm glamping at best. And even then I'm probably like, but there's no internal plumbing, that's my jam. All right. So my husband loves Colorado. He's hiking every freaking weekend. And then, of course, like I said earlier, my daughter, having made friends, I can't disappoint them. And it was a lot of conversations about how there's, it was my brilliant idea to leave. So I really loved beating myself up with that. Perfectionist, you effed it up, so you're the one who's to blame, and you're the one who has to just eat it at this point. And so there was a long period of all that, and then it was, okay, the truth is I do want to go back, but I couldn't possibly. It'd be too much money. We've put all this money into this house. I mean, I had really invested in living in Colorado. My husband and I had lived in 2 houses at that point. We had purchased a half-acre property, gorgeous half-acre property, 30 some odd trees, little forest all around us, evergreen trees, mid-century modern home that had been built in 1969 and only had one owner, still had a cork wall. And Kate, had renovated that place top to bottom. Every color, every tile, every cabinet, every knob, every switch, every light fixture, all chosen by me. I like all of it. I really thought that we were going to live there for the rest of our lives, and that we had found our dream home and fixed it up and all of that. How could I possibly suggest that after all that, we need to leave because I'm deeply, deeply unhappy here? So then that was like a whole thing. And then finally, it was just one too many nights where, I work out in the late afternoon after my work day. And so that's when I shower. And it was one too many nights where I'm crying in the shower, where I just went, I can't do this. I can't do this. And so I worked with Matthew about how to have the conversation. And then Matthew also has worked with my husband and I together in a coaching capacity, couples coaching capacity for many years. And so then it was conversations where we were all having the conversation together. It took quite a long time. It took quite a long, well, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it didn't take a long time, but it was like probably a year of wrestling with all that before a decision was finally made.
Oh, I just get a sense of so much pressure.
Yes, so much pressure.
So much pressure of, I made this decision. I upended our lives. Everyone else is happy here. My kid has friends. My husband loves the backpacking. Look at all this that I've invested into the house. Every knob, everything top to bottom. Like this, we found our place. And that much pressure feels so challenging to then say, but I'm so unhappy and I've got to leave.
Yep.
And
I was living a life that looked good on paper and didn't feel good to live. And that the irony is that I have always said that the greatest courage that, and this is long before I ever had my crash out, the greatest courage you'll ever practice is to let the truth of who you are on the inside be how you actually live on the outside. And somehow I had inverted it without realizing it. Total innocence, like genuinely believing that every choice had been an intentional one. And I think that was actually part of the greatest healing, was that I came from a family where if you made a mistake, people were going to rub your nose in the poop of that mistake. You were going to hear about it. Like literally for years, you were going to hear about it. And it was going to become a mark on your character. So you can see how the perfectionism pattern is born then. I'm going to try really hard never to make mistakes because it's tied to my survival as a child in this family system. And I think that there are parts of the perfectionistic pattern to me that are, if we move out of perfectionism and into ambition, I think the ambition is kind of hardwired. I see like the go-getter in me has been present since I was a grade schooler. And yet at the same time, that piece about you make mistakes and it like tarnishes everything was just hanging out real strong. And I think one of the most healing things to come out of this process is to realize that I am not my mistakes. And I had this insight that the comeback matters more than your setbacks, that your setbacks don't define you. The comeback is what defines you. And as I started to take these tender steps back into running my business again, and all the things that came up for me around that, for instance, of like, are people going to think I'm a flake because I took a step back? Are people going to think I'm a fraud? Because here I was, the person helping people through their stuff, and then like I crash out, and it's like it's an expanded sense of being to go, yeah, I'm allowed to actually be a human and not always know that I'm making a misaligned choice in the moment. Like sometimes that's going to happen because it happens to all of us. Sometimes with the best of intentions, it doesn't turn out how we think it will turn out. That happens to all of us. And so really this process, is not so much about where did Kate live that didn't align or all of that. It's really a process that's about how do we come home to ourselves with compassion, even when we recognize, oh, I see that I didn't make the best choice here. Or if I could do it over, I would, but since I can't, the best I can do is learn from it. And that's actually really valuable. That's not just like the sucky prize that losers get. That's actually really valuable.
there's so much goodness in there. I'm reminded of what you told me recently. I said something of like, to the extent of, I knew what I was signing up for when I signed up for this. And you said something to the extent of, yeah, you knew what you knew at the time. You didn't know what it would be like to live it
Right.
and to be in it. And with the constraints that you have now, with the capacity that you have now, I'm really reminded of that that you shared with me and how we can use the fact that we made these choices with limited information really as weapons that we use against ourselves to sort of keep ourselves from actually grappling with our truth as it is right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's part of how the pattern stays locked in place. And I think that how I walk the world now, um, is, I mean, I would say that checking in with, I love what you do with helping people to really work on the somatic system, because checking in on my somatic system happens so much more now. Boundaries don't feel so scary. I think boundaries used to feel, I would put up boundaries, but they were never comfortable. I would say now I'm a lot more comfortable going, oh yeah, boundary, that's not mine. That's not mine. And I think that I had to really see my own inherent goodness in order to get to that place. And that, I think, is the greatest gift, is that I really do believe on a deeper level that I'm a good person, not because of what I do, not because I'm perfect, certainly not. Sometimes I lose my temper, or like this is not a before and after makeover, right? Like I still am very human. Um, but I do know that I'm a good person, that I have kindness inherent in my heart for myself and for other people. And there's a lot less emphasis on what I do or what I achieve. And sometimes the old whispers do come up of, well, couldn't you be doing more? Shouldn't you be doing this? You could be making more money if you worked just a little bit harder. But I know where that leads now. And so it's a really different flavor of things. I I think of the adage of, like, like the snake, like if the snake bites you, the healthy thing to do is to move away, not to sit around going, I mean, what might I have done that would make that snake bite me? What? It's like, it bit you because it's a snake, hun. you know? And so it's like, okay, overwork is only going to get me to the same end point. I'm going to get bitten. Perfectionism and the ways in which that pattern, it was obscured to me, but now it's clear. So it's like, okay, it's clear to me now. It used to not be. It's clear. Thank you. Life, universe, all of it. It's more clear. I don't need to go down that again. It's just going to bite me again. Um, and then it's not like I think I thought that taking the foot off the gas pedal would mean that I would just completely decelerate. But I really am finding it to be true that when I pause and I check in with myself, when I arrange my environment to the best of my ability, in such a way where the people who are in my life are the people I want in my life, who I feel uplifted by rather than diminished by, when I consciously choose how I'm going to work, and when I notice that part of me that starts to get attached to an outcome, and I remind myself, like, hold on a second, attachment to outcome, you don't know how it's going to turn out. Let's not hold it so tightly. When I do those things, I end up going farther. That's what I notice. I have more energy. I believe I think more clearly. I get more done in less time. So the ambition still gets to have a home in me that I honor. But it's just not so, like, I loved how you described, I would agree with how you described your own process earlier of, like, I'm going to ram this through and get this done, and I'm going to make it happen. And, like, 100%, that was how I looked at things. And again, the paradox is that it works until it doesn't.
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, there's one last piece I would love to touch on, if you're open to it. And that's it. I know you shared about going no contact with a family member through this whole process. Um, and I just wanted to make sure to touch on that, because I know that that's something that, folks experience, and again, can feel very alone. And it's obviously can be a very challenging thing to do. And I know you shared that you carried a lot of anticipatory grief about going no contact with this family member, expecting that it would be devastating for you. And I'm curious what actually happened when you did go no contact.
Hmm. Again, in hindsight, I realized I had been grieving those relationships. There were two, one where it's no contact and one where it's low contact. And the only contact we really have is regarding a specific situation that like we just have to sort of have like administrative, I guess you could say, conversations about. And I think I thought that, how to put this? I thought that well, I think those two people really had convinced. I said that today I feel like I genuinely believe I'm a good person, and I think those two people and the dynamic had a very strong role in why I didn't think I was a good person. And so anytime there was a conflict, um, words would get twisted. I felt like my character would get hammered. It was not so much about the behavior, it was about the character. I would get mocked. I remember at one point, years before going no contact, trying through coaching, having coaching conversations about what to do and, not wanting to like just be like, bye, we're done. And seeing it as like, hey, like I continue to grow, they continue to grow. But I remember saying, I need some space from this relationship. And I was mocked for that later. Oh, you need some space. Like it was just so condescending and mocking. Um, and so I think that I went through a lot of anticipatory grief and sadness about those relationships. And to me, it was never on the table that I would ever go no contact, ever. And then I had an experience. This is when I'd started to come out of feeling so depressed and unhappy. And I had this experience where I had a really, really intense family illness, let's say. And the person that I went no contact with was just nowhere to be found, but they were totally giving love and support to somebody else who was involved in that situation. And something clicked where I realized they know how to show up for people in a way that's loving and connected because I'm watching them do it with this other person. They're just not doing it with me. That's a choice. This isn't, oh, Kate, if you would just like stop whatever thing they're telling you you're doing, which when I looked back too, it was just like annoyances. I was never cruel. I was never unkind. It was like, we want everybody to get together at this date and time. And I would be like, oh, I don't know if that date and time works. And then the attitude would be like, oh, I mean, you always have to overcomplicate everything. Like that's annoying. That's annoying. And I acknowledge that for them, it was annoying. Um, but it wasn't cruelty. It wasn't name calling. It wasn't, and there was something about that. And I just went, I don't want to do this anymore. I just, something hit. I felt very calm. And that's part of how I knew that a deep, deep truth had arisen. I wasn't reactive. I wasn't like hurt, like, how dare they not support me, but support that person. It didn't feel like that at all. It just felt like, oh, oh, like I've spent decades of my life trying to fix this. And this is what it comes down to. And then the other thing too was that I realized that continuing with the dynamic was only creating scar tissue. That for me to step away, I actually genuinely believe is the more loving choice because the dynamic, which I had been working on myself in coaching and therapy over many decades, I presume, had been working on with their people because I know that this person had a therapist, had done sessions with a therapist trying to have us all show up in a room, had gone to workshops on my own, had invited that person to workshops and they had come, had read book, like how many decades and how much of this do we both need to be doing before it's no longer the loving choice to keep trying to make this work and it's not working and somehow even though I'm doing the best I can, I seem to just be causing you more distress. And I don't even want to debate anymore. Am I the one who did it? Am I causing you distress? And therefore I'm the bad. Like, that's not even on the table anymore. The kindest thing for both of us is to stop the scar tissue. And so I let the person know that I was going to take space. And I stated that I was not open to receiving phone calls, letters, emails, texts. So I defined the boundary, and that was it. And I have felt nothing but lighter ever since. I no longer brace myself or tighten or like I just, when holidays come up or birthdays come around, it's not even on the radar. I don't mean it's not on the radar as if I've just like flicked people away like they didn't matter at all. Of course, on some level, I deeply love these family members of mine, but I love them from a place of I want to of the shared memories we have had where things were good, and I recognize that I can love them, and also it isn't healthy for me to be in a space with them. And I would imagine I would imagine if they really think about it, it wouldn't feel healthy to them either, because the feedback I got from them was always that I was the problem. So if I was the problem and I'm removing myself from the relationship, my hope would be that they would no longer have a problem.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing about this. I know I th- I think this is a choice that people have such a hard time coming to, and um I think it can just be helpful to hear that somebody came to this choice obviously very thoughtfully. There was nothing that I hear in what you shared of like willy-nilly, oh, I'm just going to suddenly go no contact. This was very intentional choice after many, 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 many years of trying. And I think it's important to be able to share and say that you feel lighter, actually. You were anticipating huge amounts of grief and that you felt peace. You felt lighter. It's had a positive impact on your well being.
Yes. And if anything, there was a sense of I don't want to hurt them. That was the biggest thing. How can I phrase that I am stepping away from this relationship in the way that is as neutral and kind as possible? Because I am aware that the person on the other side, to them, it probably feels different. And at least hearing stories of other people, Oprah recently did her, episode, or I guess it was a couple months ago, on families going no contact. And she talked to both sides. And, there are people who are very hurt when someone goes no contact and they don't understand why. And I don't know if my family fully understands why. Um, Ultimately, though, I I just feel very rooted in that's not my responsibility anymore. Like, I know that looked under every stone I knew to look under. And if, again, since so much of the theme of today's podcast is the things you realize in hindsight, if I if I go through any additional new learning and have new awareness around something that I didn't explore, because you don't know what you don't know until you realize what you don't know, then certainly I will do that exploration of myself, and or I would reach out to them and say, do you have an interest in a conversation? And be very respectful and understanding if they say, absolutely not. You really hurt me and I don't want to talk to you and I don't want to have a reparative conversation. And it's like, okay, I would accept that. At this time, I don't have an interest in doing that work though, because from what I know, um, this is years of self work in addition to relational work, and um, it never went anywhere for many decades. And I don't think it's the best thing for my mental health to try to do that work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to transition us to a little bit of rapid fire questions here at the end, if that's okay with you, just to help
It's good.
get to know you a little bit better. But first, is there anything that you'd like to say in closing that feels like it needs another moment to wrap up from the podcast today?
Hmm. Um, I think really speaking to the person who is very hard on themselves, that it can feel like um, you messed it all up. It can feel like being gentle on yourself or giving yourself compassion is giving yourself an out, so to speak, or letting yourself off the hook. And that there's a very big difference between accountability and blame. And accountability is about taking responsibility. Blame is just about pointing fingers and reminding you and rubbing your face in the poop of your mistake over and over again. It's not very helpful, actually. So if your interest as somebody who maybe is a high achiever, perfectionist pattern, really, really, really tries to get things right, if your interest is in truly trying to learn and grow, what I've really learned is that the more efficient thing for your growth is that self-compassion.
Mm, I love that. What do you wish people knew about these identity thresholds?
That you get room to grow, to fumble, that you are human and you're allowed to not know how it's going to go and to be scared and to experience all of it and not have to have some right way of going through it. It probably will feel really scary, and that's okay. It's uncomfortable, but it's okay.
Mm. What's the last thing that truly surprised you?
Um, I mean, this almost feels embarrassing to say, but the the level to which people will twist to accept the Trump administration, like the Epstein files, and like the level of contorting that people will do to still make it okay, everything that's going on. And I say it's embarrassing to say because I know that marginalized communities have long said, oh, no, no, no. Like, this is what happens. And I am somebody who does work to look at the marginalized experience. And of course, I experience my isms as a woman and things like that. And like, still, I'm shocked. I'm like, where's the integrity? Wrong is wrong, even if it isn't your favorite political candidate. It surprises me.
Mm. What consistently brings you deep joy?
My husband, there's this and we've been together for more than 20 years, and there's this way his eyes crinkle when he looks at me. My daughter, I love, 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 love watching her grow up and hearing her stories. And I would say my dogs.
Thank you so much, Kate, for your time, for just so courageously sharing this experience. I know it's been nourishing for me to listen to and have this conversation. I know it will be for many others. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.